What's up, everyone? Welcome back to part 2 of my 4-part draft reaction and recap series. As I mentioned yesterday, I'm doing this in a little bit different format than I usually do. I'm taking it 2 divisions at a time, 8 teams total. Yesterday, I did the AFC South and NFC North. Today's lucky divisions are the AFC West and the NFC East. Arguably, or actually probably not even arguably, they were the 2 most drama-packed divisions in the whole draft. So lots of really intriguing storylines and kind of wild picks to go over. So let's first start out with the AFC West, and of course the team that won the AFC West last year, that was the Kansas City Chiefs. A couple days before the draft, they spent their first-round pick on Frank Clark, and they also sent over a second-round pick. And I believe they also swapped third. So it was a huge sum of assets that Kansas City gave up for Frank Clark. And to me, I wasn't super on board with that. And I know people are going to, you're a hypocrite. You talked about how much you loved the Khalil Mack trade last year. Yeah, and the difference is that was Khalil Mack. Like, if I'm going to be giving up multiple high-value draft assets like the Bears did for Khalil Mack, like, it better be for a player of Mack's caliber. To me, Frank Clark he's not in the same category. He's not even remotely the same player as Khalil Mack. He's good. He's very good. But, I mean, we're talking about Khalil Mack as probably a generational edge talent here. Probably somebody who's going to end up like a first ballot Hall of Fame kind of player. Like, that's not Frank Clark. Again, he's good. He's a upper tier-ish pass rusher in the league. He's probably going to be good for double-digit sacks. He's good against the run. He's a high-effort player, but he's not Khalil. It's just straight up. Like, when I look at the Chiefs, they're obviously in win-now mode. That's the whole reason why they traded for Frank in the first place. But they already had Dee Ford on the roster, who to me can get you the exact same production, and you pay him probably the same kind of money, at least in the same realm of money. And you don't have to give up multiple high-value picks to do it. Like, if you were going to pay a pass rusher, you might as well pay the one that's already on your team. I understand they were kind of going more for scheme fit, but like Dee Ford, even back at Auburn, he played standing up and he played with his hand in the dirt. To me, scheme wasn't really an issue with him. You're going to end up getting the same production, in my opinion, sack-wise, out of Dee Ford that you get out of Frank Clark, and you don't have to give up picks to do it. So that trade, to me, I wasn't a huge fan of it, which is unfortunate because I was a fan of the rest of their draft. You know, if they stuck around and spent a first-round pick on, you know, whatever BPA was at the time, just throw a dart at the defensive depth chart, they could have got whoever they want for that defense. You know, if you get a first-round talent on defense at, you know, insert position here that you're also getting for cheap, and you pay Dee Ford, and obviously you set aside money to pay Chris Jones because he's going to get a truckload of money whenever he's, you know, due for signing. And then you go through the rest of their draft. I would actually like their class a lot, but just the lack of value in that Frank Clark trade kind of just, it sours me on it a little bit. I really like the Hardman pick. He's going to be crucial for that offense, especially if this Tyreek Hill thing turns into a suspension or a release or whatever it's going to be. Side note, that guy. The Thornhill pick in the second round, a few picks after Hardman, I like as well. They needed safety help. They got safety help. And Thornhill, he's such an athletic freak, you know, height, weight, speed. You could put him at free. You could put him at strong. I don't think that it's beyond the realm of possibility that you can even maybe put him like a dime linebacker type of thing. You know, he's obviously not, you know, a hitter like a linebacker, but he gives you that kind of flexibility with his athletic profile that if you're having trouble with receiving backs, you put him in at dime linebacker, nickel linebacker, whatever you want to do, really, and have him be your kind of eraser for running backs in coverage. I'm totally fine with that. So his athleticism, his physical profile gives him versatility. I'm not entirely sure how they're going to use Tyron because, again, Tyron in the past was also kind of a flexible guy. He's played free safety, he's played strong safety, he's played in the slot. Not entirely sure how they're going to use him yet. I haven't read up on that, but Thornhill is so athletic that you can kind of play him around whatever your desired role for Tyron is. Colin Saunders, I love that pick in the third round. Very, very sneaky defensive tackle prospect. For how big he is, he's super athletic. I think you can put him at either nose or at 3-tech, so you can kind of mix up your fronts a little bit with Chris Jones. You can kind of shift them during cadences to really screw with protections. I think they're a really good fit together. And then they came back, they got Fenton in the 6th round. That's a value pick at corner. I had him as a 5th round grade, so I like that. Thompson they got for running back depth, which they desperately needed in the 6th. And then in the 7th, they got Nick Allegretti, who to me he was more of a free agent type of pick, but I guess they liked him enough to make sure he was on their camp roster when they're trying to cut down to 53. He's probably going to end up at guard. I don't know if I want him at center in that offense, but they'll probably work him either at left guard, right guard, see if he sticks. But it's 7th round pick. It's not the worst thing in the world. So overall, I really like their class. They got speed at receiver. They got versatility at safety. They got versatility at defensive tackle. They got corner depth, which they desperately needed. They got running back depth. Very, very solid class for them, especially considering they only had 6 picks after the Clark trade. And for a contending team, which the Chiefs definitely are, as long as Pat Mahomes is their quarterback, for a contending team, this was a pretty solid draft, and it did nothing to make me think that they still won't be a contending team. So great job by them. Unfortunately, though, they're going to have to tangle with the Chargers this season, and they absolutely crushed it. I mean, they had a extremely strong draft to the point where I really am not looking forward to going to that Chargers-Texans game in LA this season because I feel like we're going to get our asses kicked. I mean, god damn, when you look at this defense, I mean, top to bottom, it was already really damn talented, and now it's borderline unfair. You got Tillery at defensive tackle, which was a fantastic value for them. I thought he could have been a top 15 to 20 pick. That's where I mocked him to Tennessee back when I did my mock draft. He reminds me of like a hybrid between Mike Daniels and DeForest Buckner. And I think he could very easily produce like that, especially if they're putting him at 3 technique. He's very solid against the run, fantastic interior pass rusher. If he didn't tear his labrum, I think in the 5th game of the year, he tore it on like his first sack against Stanford and then got 3 more sacks that game. But he got 7 sacks in his first 5 games and then tore his labrum, and then I think he only had 1 sack the rest of the year. But he was on a tear, challenging every other defensive lineman in this class as the title of best defensive tackle. He was up there with Quinnen. He was up there with Simmons. I mean, he is a fantastic talent. And to snag him at 28 is incredible value. Very, very well done by them. And they didn't even have to do anything. They didn't have to give up any assets. They just waited their turn, and he was just sitting there. So great job by them. They got Adderley in the 2nd round, late 2nd round. Again, I did not think he was going to be there. You pair him with Derwin James, and that's a safety core that can frickin' run right there. I mean, good Lord. Derwin at strong safety, Adderley at free safety, and there's no weakness there. There's no weakness in their secondary. It's absolutely absurd. Tillery covered probably their biggest weakness, which was defensive tackle. He's a great defensive tackle. So you got Bosa, you got Ingram, you got Tillery in your 3rd down pass rush. You got great safeties, great corners because King and Hayward are still there. You got Drew Tranquil, who they got at linebacker. Again, they needed linebacker depth. He was one of my top 5 linebackers. I think I had him at 4th overall in my linebacker rankings. Again, he's fast, rangy. He's got safety in his background. So if they're kind of looking to play more of that lighter defensive, that lighter back 7 look behind the defensive line that I broke down last year. If they want more of that hybrid safety linebacker that's fast and physical, great in coverage, can handle running backs in space, Tranquil fits them to a T. So I love that pick. Gives them even more speed on a very fast defense. So again, they're freaking killing it. I like the Pipkins pick, by the way, in the late 3rd for tackle depth. I had him, I can't remember where I had him in my tackle rankings, but I know I had like a 3rd to 4th round grade on him. So again, that's proper value for him. More of a developmental tackle, but that's fine for a late 3rd round pick. It's kind of what you expect out of the tackle position. They got Easton Stick for like a developmental 3rd string quarterback in the 5th. I don't think he's going to be challenging Tyrod for the backup spot, but again, for a developmental quarterback, you can do a lot worse than that in the 5th round. So overall, I absolutely adored this Chargers class. They shored up some weaknesses on defense. They improved some strengths on defense. They improved their tackle depth. They improved their quarterback depth. Not that Rivers is ever going to miss a game because the dude's tough as nails, but still, I mean, you're only as good as your worst quarterback, as far as I'm concerned. The Eagles proved that a couple years ago. So I'm in love with this Chargers class. They really knocked it out of the park. I'd put them up with Jacksonville. I'd put them up with Green Bay among the best classes in the league. They were already a damn good team, and they're even better now. As far as I'm concerned, they are firmly in that, top 5 or 6 contending teams discussion, because they don't have a whole lot of weaknesses at this point. They really don't. They're locked, loaded, and ready to go as far as I'm concerned. But they're going to have to get through the Broncos first, who's the third team that I'm going over. And the Broncos were frustrating last year because they showed the capability to beat anyone. They just really couldn't get out of their own way. And it was unfortunate for them that they were in such a tough division with the Chargers and with the Chiefs, who, yes, I think the Chargers and the Chiefs were better teams, but that doesn't necessarily mean I don't think the Broncos can't beat them. They proved it last year. I mean, they gave both of them extreme amounts of trouble. I think the Broncos actually beat the Chargers, now that I think about it. I think they split with them. But, the Broncos were a much better team than their record indicated last year. They just had problems at quarterback, and they had problems at head coach. And that's, the two most important things you can have for a contending team. But, in my opinion, they got arguably the best coaching hire of the offseason in Vic Fangio. I think he's going to bring back that fearsome Broncos defense that carried them to a Super Bowl win when the corpse of Peyton Manning was playing for them a few years back. I think that they upgraded at quarterback slightly with Joe Flacco. Not that he's great himself, but I feel like when you give him this offense, which is a Gary Kubiak-inspired offense, Flacco's best career year was in a similar system with similar terminology, similar concepts, a lot of boot action, a lot of throwing deep bombs. On those deep crossing routes to Cortland Sutton, a lot of zone stretch with Phillip Lindsay. Like, he's comfortable in that kind of system. He performed well in that kind of system in the past. So I think the fact that he's back in that offense means that we're going to get an improved Broncos offense. And if you throw that together with an improved Broncos defense under Vic Fangio, not that they were bad last year, but Vic Fangio is just, a god of defensive coaching as far as I'm concerned. He's one of the greatest defensive coaches in the history of the sport, in my opinion. So you put him with that defense, and you give Joe Flacco a slight upgrade for the offense, and, the Broncos are a tough team again. Not that they weren't a tough team last year, but I feel like their two biggest problems are now gone, and they still have a great roster to work with. So when I look at their draft specifically, they picked up Noah Fant in the first round after trading back 10 spots, which I was convinced they were going to take Haskins, but I guess they were really zoned in on Drew Lock as a second round value, which they ended up getting miraculously. I didn't expect that, but back to Fant. He's going to be their George Kittle. Again, San Francisco runs a very similar offense to what Denver is going to be running this year, and that Shanahan Kubiak kind of style of zone run game, West Coast passing concepts, lots of boots, lots of crossing routes, deep overs. And Noah Fant, even though he's maybe not the most refined tight end, he's not nearly as refined as Hawkinson was coming out, especially as a blocker. He's much more athletic. And so you get him on the move in these crossing routes and deep overs, and there's not a whole lot of linebackers and safeties in the league that can cover this kind of athlete. You look at his size, you look at his speed, you look at his overall catch radius. There are going to be some concentration drops here and there, but he is built for this style. He is built to just get him the ball wide open on the backside on a bootleg and just let him run. Like, he's a perfect fit. So I really love that value for them. I don't know exactly how much he's going to be producing as a rookie because, again, rookie tight ends typically don't produce that much. But considering the scheme fit and considering what another young tight end did in the same system in Kittle, I wouldn't be shocked if we see the same kind of production from Fant because he's an even better athlete than Kittle was coming out, and Kittle was super athletic. He didn't get enough credit for how athletic he was coming out of Iowa, and Fant's even faster and even quicker. So love that fit for them. And then they got Reisner in the top of the second round, inexplicably to me. Like, I had him going in the top 20. Like, I still can't believe they got that kind of value for him. He can play 4 spots along the offensive line, so I'm not entirely sure which one they're going to slide him in yet. But with Mike Munchak there, who's easily, to me, one of the 3 best offensive line coaches in the whole league, like that's not even a debate when you see what he did in Pittsburgh the last few years. With Mike Munchak there and with a talent like Reisner that can play 4 out of the 5 positions, I don't necessarily care what they drafted him to play because I know Mike's going to get him ready to play everything. He can play left guard, center, right guard, right tackle. Whatever they need him to do, he'll do it. So I think that's perfect. Just giving that kind of offensive line coach that kind of talent to work with, you really can't go wrong with that. So I love that pick, not just because of Dalton, but because of who they're going to be having to coach Dalton. Great job by them. And then, one pick later, in the 10th pick in the second round, they got Locke, which I was convinced he was going to go in the first round just because he's so naturally gifted. And the fact that Flacco is there and the fact that I'm comfortable with Flacco being there and the starter in this system, Locke doesn't have to play right away. And that was one of my big concerns about him was I didn't want him to go somewhere that he was going to have to play right away. Like that was my main concern with him is I didn't want him going somewhere that he was going to be starting week 1 because he's not Kyler and he's not Haskins, who I think both are week 1 starters. Locke can sit behind Flacco. He can learn this playbook. He can learn the terminology because it's a notoriously difficult offense for a young quarterback to master, especially in 1 year. So I think he's going to need at least a year on the bench anyway. Not to fix anything like a major mechanical flaw, but just because the offense itself, it's got a lot going on. Like there's a lot of tags, there's a lot of protections he's got to know. There's a lot of let's call them if-then statements in terms of what pre-snap coverages are dictating to him versus what post-snap coverages are dictating to him. The progressions are all laid out in a very specific way based on the relationship of the defense to the offense, as all West Coast offenses are. But, the progressions can shift to wildly different orders depending on what he's seeing pre and post snap. So again, it's not an easy system to just come in as a rookie and just know it. Like there's a lot he's going to have to digest. So again, it's a great destination for him. He's got a fantastic arm. He's mobile. He's got size. He's got football character that you like in your quarterback and that he works really hard. He's got experience. So again, I couldn't imagine a better destination for him as a second round pick than Denver. Great job. And then Draymond Jones in the 3rd round. What the hell? Why was he even there? To me, he's going to be filling that kind of Antonio Smith role that they had back during their Super Bowl run, that rotational, quicker than strong interior pass rusher. Again, I don't think he's going to be a guy that you start and have him hold the point and 2 gap on guards and all that kind of stuff. That's not what he does. He gets after the passer, and he's super quick, and he's super productive as a pass rusher. So I thought he was going to be long gone. I thought he was going to be at least a high to mid second round pick because interior pass rush is hard to find. So again, to get him in the top of the 3rd, tremendous value. And then in the 5th, they took Justin Hollins because, of course, it wouldn't be a John Elway draft class if they didn't take an edge rusher at some point. Seems like it's kind of a tradition for them, really, to get edge rusher depth every single year. But I was totally fine with that pick because, you can never really have enough edge rushers. And then in the 6th, they got Juwann Winfree, who personally I did not have a complete grade on him because it seems like he's dealt with injury issues for the last 2 years. He's bounced around in different places. I wasn't sure if his pro day times were affected by his injury issues. So to me, it's a 6th round flyer. Like, we're going to get him into camp. We're going to see what we've got kind of pick. I was totally fine with it. Again, the receiving core, it's fine as is. This was really just a lottery ticket kind of pick. So I was good with it. Overall, for only having 6 picks, I mean, the Broncos, to me, got at least 2 immediate impact players in Fant and Reisner. They got a potential quarterback of the future who's extremely talented and probably doesn't have to start this year at all. They got a rotational pass rusher who can maybe be an immediate impact player in 2019, but at the very least by 2020, I think he's going to be an impact player. They got some special teams help and rotational edge depth with Hollins, and they got a lotto ticket receiver in Winfree. So really a fantastic job, no pun intended, by John Elway here. I questioned him a lot last year when he passed up on a great quarterback class and didn't take the opportunity to get Josh Rosen, but look at where we are now. I mean, he got a very talented quarterback, and he stayed true to his board. He took the best players available, and he's built a hell of a team. So he kind of shut my ass up pretty good. So great job, Elway. I feel like he's kind of learned from his mistakes in the past, and he's become, honestly, a better GM year after year. And I don't want to say that, the Broncos are on the verge of building something special here, but it's kind of trending that way. If they hit on this lock pick, that's going to be a hell of a tough team to beat. They're already a tough team to beat, but this could be a special ball club in a couple years if they hit on that lock pick. So from there, let's go to Oakland and kind of round out the AFC West by talking a little bit of Raiders. They were always their typical entertaining selves in the draft in true Raider fashion. They had 3 first-round picks to work with after the Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper trades. Personally, I loved what they did with 2 of them. Pretty confused by the other one. Obviously, I'm talking about that Cleveland Ferrell pick at number 4. There's getting your guy, and I understand that they were trying to trade out of that pick. But if you know that he's probably going to be available later, as evidenced by the fact that you're trying to trade out of that pick, maybe that's a clue that you shouldn't take him at 4th overall. Just a thought there. They were really going for this whole, leadership and toughness in the locker room trend. Like, Josh Jacobs, impeccable character. Jonathan Abram, impeccable character. Both great leaders. Ferrell, impeccable character, great leader. Tough, hard-nosed guys they took in the first round. But to me, if the talent isn't there, the talent isn't there. Like, it's one thing if you're taking him. I would even accept if it was in the late first round. Personally, I had him graded as a day 2 guy. I would accept it in the late first round where you're really trying to get those culture builders, those solid, hit a double in the gap kind of players where you think that he might not be as high upside as some of the other guys that went ahead of him, but you think that his floor is high. Like, I'll accept that in that range. But in the top 5, you better be getting an all-pro kind of talent. I don't feel like Ferrell is an all-pro kind of talent. I think he's honestly, he's a base end. He is, to me, a Robin, not a Batman. That's probably the best metaphor I can use. Like, you look at other pass rushers that go in the top 5. We're looking at guys like the Bosa brothers, like Bradley Chubb and Myles Garrett, who went 1st overall. Khalil Mack went in the top 5. Jadeveon Clowney. Like, Ferrell is not in the same stratosphere of talent as any of those guys. And that's saying something because I think that, Chubb and Mack and Clowney are in their own tier, even above the Bosa brothers. And Ferrell's not even as good as the Bosas. I'm not saying I don't like the player. I like him, but not as a top 5 pick. So again, it's frustrating to me because I know that they were probably planning on trading out. They were falling in love with Ferrell the entire time, thinking, we can probably maybe try to entice Miami or maybe entice the Broncos to trade up for a quarterback. They were probably planning on getting him somewhere between 10 and 20, is my guess. And when that trade offer didn't come, they said, screw it. We've been envisioning him as a Raider for so long. We don't care that the value isn't there. We're going to take him anyway. I respect the balls to do that, but I fundamentally disagree with that as a draft philosophy. Because as far as I'm concerned, you should be sticking to best player available, with the only exception being quarterback if you're in a top 5 pick, and he was not the best player available. I don't think anybody had him as one of the 5 best players in this class. And maybe Mike Mayock knows better than anybody. That's possible. Maybe John Gruden knows better than anybody. That's possible. But based on my estimation and based on the estimation of literally every other analyst out there, this kid was not a top 5 talent. And I'm be willing to dedicate an episode to saying how wrong I was, just like I dedicated an episode of the Pat Mahomes disproving me. I'm totally willing to do that in 2 years if he comes out and lights it up and becomes an all-pro defensive player of the year kind of guy. But I don't think he will. So again, that pick just frustrates the hell out of me because I feel like they expected to trade down and get him where maybe the value was a little bit better. And then when the trade didn't come, they said, it, we'll take him anyway. That's not how you build a contending team, in my opinion. It's just not. Now, the Jacobs pick and the Abram pick, I love them. They got them at the proper value. Like, I was totally on board with those picks. I think Jacobs is going to be a great running back. I think Abram's going to be a great strong safety. So those 2 picks, again, great value. Totally on board. And even the Trayvon Mullen pick in the 2nd round. Like, people said maybe that was a little bit early for him, but you look at their scheme fit and how he fits into them as he could play either outside or nickel. He's got great feet. He's explosive. He's got good hips. Again, maybe it was a slight reach, but when you factor in scheme fit and the fact that they're totally fine with having their nickel corner be soft and off and kind of just drive on balls underneath, that's fine with me. Like he fits that in terms of what they want in a nickel corner. I think he's probably going to challenge Lawson for that starting nickel job from day one. So again, I was totally fine with that pick. I really liked him. The Crosby pick in the 4th, again, totally fine with that. They needed defensive end depth. I guess behind Furl now. So, Crosby was a 4th-round talent, properly valued. They took him in the 4th round. Totally fine with it. The Moreau pick in the 4th also. That was a sneaky pick that I like as well. Again, kind of fitting with their theme of going for character guys. He wore number 18 at LSU, which is a very special number. You don't get to wear 18. Not everybody gets to wear 18. That's reserved for really the captain of all captains kind of guy on their roster. You have to be an exemplary character both on and off the field to get to wear 18 and be an exceptional leader, and that's what Moreau was for that offense. Doesn't hurt the fact that he's also an athletic, versatile tight end that could, catch, run, block, and do everything for them. So I was totally fine with that pick too. Renfrow in the 5th, another Clemson guy. He was prototypical slot receiver, clutch in big games, great hands, great route runner, totally fit a 5th-round value. So, again, the theme here overall is they really had a great draft, except for their first pick. I had the same valuations on every single one of the players they took, except for Quentin Bell. I didn't study him because I don't have any Prairie View tape on me. Obviously, they did. But, everybody else, I feel like they got good value for, except for Furl. And that just killed the whole draft for me. They were staring Josh Allen in the face, who to me is not even in the same league of prospect. It's going to bother me for a long time, especially if Allen goes on to have a fantastic career in Jacksonville and prove himself to be the game record that I think he's going to be. And if Furl doesn't match that, this pick is going to be seen as a black eye on this whole draft class for a long time. Even if Jacobs works out and Abram works out and Mullen is a good nickel corner and Crosby's good rotational depth and Moreau is a contributor on special teams and as a reserve tight end or a number 2 tight end, H-back, whatever they want to put him at. Even if Renfrow ends up being a slot receiver, a starting slot receiver in their 11 personnel package, even if they nail everything in this class, if that Furl pick doesn't work out, we're going to have some problems because that is an extremely highly valuable asset that they endured a really terrible season to get, and I feel like they kind of wasted it. Again, not saying that Furl's a bad player. I think he was a solid day 2 prospect that any rotation for a defensive line would be happy to have. But he's not that alpha killer Khalil Mack, Bradley Chubb, Myles Garrett. He's just not. So that was my problem with it. I feel like they had a really good class that I was soured on, 20 minutes into the draft. And it's unfair. It's unfair. I fully acknowledge it's unfair to them, but that's how much that pick pissed me off. That's how much it pissed me off, is the fact that they had a really good class and I still don't like it. That's how much I hated that pick. But at least rest easy, Raiders fans. It wasn't as bad as Daniel Jones at 6. So believe me, we'll get to that later. For now, though, I do want to get to the NFC East, and we'll start it off with the team that won the NFC East last year, the Cowboys. This was a very telling draft to me for Dallas, because when you look at their salary cap situation, I felt even going into this whole draft process that who they took was pretty much going to tell you exactly what they were going to do in free agency. Because when you look at all the people that have expiring contracts, either this coming off season in March of 2020 or the one after that, it's pretty much their entire core of talent. It's pretty insane, all the people they're going to have to pay. Lyle Collins is due, Amari Cooper's due. Obviously, they're going to pay him because they just spent a first-round pick on him. Byron Jones is due. Christian Covington's due. I think they only signed him for a 1-year deal because he was just in Houston last year. Jalen Smith is due. They're definitely going to keep him. He's an integral piece of that defense. Malik Collins is due. Xavier Su'a-Filo is due. He was guard depth for them. Obviously, they got to pay Dak. There's no 5th-year option on his contract because he was a 4th-round pick, not a 1st-round pick. So they're going to have to pay him before they pay a lot of these guys. Zeke's 5th-year option expires the year after that. So like their almost entire young core of talent is going to be having expiring deals either this year or next year, and they can't afford everyone. It's just not even possible. Like they were up against the cap as it is, and now they're straight up screwed when it comes to trying to re-sign some of these guys. So when I was looking at their draft class, I was really noticing a pattern in terms of they're trying to draft early, knowing that they're not going to be able to keep everybody. That's why they took Tristan Hill in the 2nd round, because they're probably not going to be able to re-sign Malik Collins. So they took another 3-tech to replace him. You know, they took Joe Jackson, who to me was kind of more of like a hybrid player. He's like a hybrid defensive end, defensive tackle. I don't think he's necessarily explosive enough to rush off the edge, but I think you can shift him inside on 3rd down packages and have him play 3 technique for you. So between Hill and Jackson, that's probably going to be their Collins replacement because, again, they probably just can't afford him. They got McGovern in the 3rd to ideally replace Su'a-Filo because not that Su'a-Filo is going to get a big money deal. He's not good enough to, but still, you know, every dollar counts when you're trying to sign a wide receiver and a corner and a quarterback and a running back, and it's just too much. So McGovern was a good value pick for them to give them guard depth because they're probably going to lose at least one. I really like the Pollard and the Weber pick. Weber went way later than I thought he would. 2 bigger backs, just kind of in the worst case scenario of them not being able to keep Zeke. You know, you got Pollard and Weber there who can maybe in a committee kind of share that load that Zeke shared himself. Neither one of them are as big as Zeke, but Weber specifically has Zeke's kind of speed and receiving ability, so I'm totally on board with that pick. I think that was a great value for them. So they got running back depth. They took Michael Jackson in the 5th, who technique-wise he's got a lot to clean up, but athleticism, in terms of his athleticism, I mean he's right up there with Byron Jones, like just a true freak athlete. Who, again, if worst case scenario, if they lose Byron to the open market, because they just spent a whole bunch of money on DeMarcus and they got to pay Dak and they got to pay Amari at a minimum, you know that's another $30+ million, maybe closer to $40 million coming off the books. If they can't afford Byron on top of that, you know, they got a freak athlete here at corner in Jackson that they can try to develop over 2019 to be ready for 2020. So I really like all this planning ahead that they're doing because they know they probably have an idea of who they're going to try to re-sign the most. The fact that they didn't take a linebacker tells me that they're definitely going to be re-signing Jalen. They didn't take a receiver, so we know they're definitely going to be re-signing Amari, as if there was any doubt. We know they're re-signing Dak. So, you know, really it comes down to Collins, the other Collins, Byron Jones, and Zeke. You know, we don't know if they're going to be able to probably let go 2 of them, maybe let go 1 of them. It's going to be a really tough situation for them. But I like the overall mentality with this draft of we know we're going to lose some guys. We know we're going to get some comp picks, but we need to get depth and we need to get help now and have some answers on the roster already before this kind of cap apocalypse happens. So I love their mentality with this draft class. I think it was a perfect strategy for a team that's really up against it. And I think this is how you have a roster that's a contender for 2019 that is potentially going to blow up in 2020, but you still infuse them with enough talent to still be a contender in 2020. Like, this to me is the perfect way to not just build a potential one-off go get a ring kind of ball club, but a win a ring every year kind of ball club. Not saying that the Cowboys are going to be a dynasty type team here, but you know, to me, in terms of building a team, I want to get 6 rings. I don't want to get 1. And I think they're doing the right moves to try to get 6 rings instead of 1. So really, the best possible job they could have done here by them, considering the circumstances. I really love their draft because of that. You know, when I look at the Eagles, speaking of teams that are kind of like the poster child for that all-in mentality and let's go for a Super Bowl and let's, you know, spend in free agency and bring in all these guys and have it pay off in February. You know, speaking of the Eagles, who always kind of, not always, but at least in the last couple of years have had a different mentality than Dallas. They have significantly fewer picks in this draft, but again, they know they're in their window, and they know that they're very good at supplementing their depth with cheap free agent deals. For some reason, to me, like they're among the best in the league at finding value free agents, so that they can afford to be a little bit more aggressive in the draft. You know, their cap has always been supremely managed. I don't know how he does it, but they've never really been in true cap trouble like some other teams that have gone all in the past. Like when you look at teams like, you know, the Rams or the Bears, or even the Cowboys, where you're like, oh my God, like their team's gonna blow up in a year or two because they can't afford everybody. The Eagles always find ways to afford everybody. It's how they structure their contracts and how they almost like layer different front loads and back loads together, and then find those cheap veteran free agents that are ring chasing, and just their whole free agency strategy allows them to be much more aggressive than most other teams in the draft. And it's a very unique situation. It's a very unique front office. And so I kind of hold the Eagles to a different standard than everybody else, because they've proven in free agency that they're just better than everybody at managing that aspect of roster management. So when I look at the Eagles and how they gave up, you know, they're spending draft capital to go get Andre Dillard, which to me was a good move. Like in the first round, having a talent like Andre Dillard fall that far, and knowing, I mean, everybody knew that the Texans were going to take him. Like that was the most obvious pick in the draft. If he was there at 23, he was going to be a Texan. And so for the Eagles to recognize that and know that our depth is in a good place, we can sacrifice this pick and move up and go get our guy to replace Jason Peters, that was a beautiful move, phenomenal move. And then Sanders, again, you know, they traded, they got Jordan Howard, but they knew that Howard is a one-dimensional player, and B, Sanders is a much more dynamic athlete. He's a little bit more versatile, he's got more burst, he's got more long speed. So they're like, you know what, we usually operate on a running back by committee anyway. Let's go get Miles Sanders, take him here in the second round. Let's fill a need, which maybe is not the biggest need, but it's still a need because of how we play with a rotation in the backfield, a constant rotation in the backfield. Let's go get our guy. Again, great move for them. They got J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and this is the kind of draft pick that gives them that free agency flexibility in the first place, because Arcega-Whiteside is essentially just Alshon Jeffrey. So now they have a cheap replacement for Alshon Jeffrey. If they start to get into a little bit of cap trouble, they can get out of that Jeffrey contract and have a big body X receiver that can go up and high point the ball on the boundary. And he's just right there. He's cheap. He's going to be, you know, less than $1 million a year. So just, you know, how the Eagles and how Howie Roseman kind of interweave the draft process with free agency, and how they're always thinking not just one, not two, not three, but like 5 or 10 steps ahead. And they have a constant plan. It's like a 3-year plan every single year. And they execute it ruthlessly and mercilessly. And they're so damn good. They're so good. You know, they stick to their philosophy, and they know exactly how to execute it. I mean, the Sharif Miller pick in the 4th round, you know, what's like the one thing the Eagles have become known as? Drafting defensive line, having a constant rotation, you know, getting guys in, getting guys out, keeping them fresh. Even if they only play half the snaps, that's fine for them, because they know that on those 50% of snaps, they're going to get 100% effort out of every single one of those guys in the defensive rotation. And Miller, again, he plays balls to the wall. Not the most explosive guy in the world, but he's got great technique. He's got power. He fits them. He fits everything that they like in a rotational defensive end. They got Thornton, who, again, Northwestern, he's a late 5th round pick. I had him graded him as more of a 6th kind of guy. But he's got tons of talent. He's mobile, he's got size, he's got arm. Not the most accurate guy, especially off platform, but you know, for a second or third string quarterback, a developmental guy, you could do a lot worse than that. So overall, I'm very enthusiastic about this Eagles class, because I love watching that front office work. I think they're the most unique front office in the league, because in my opinion, they're just better than everyone else in March, which allows them to be it allows them to kind of have a unique position in April. You know, being better in March means they can be better in April and be more aggressive in April, and that really showed up with that Dillard pick. It showed up in the Sanders pick, in the Arcega-Whiteside pick. Like, I love watching Howie Roseman work, man. He's he's arguably the best GM in the game, and he has been for a while. You know, I learned so much from watching his process of team building, and I think everybody else could learn a lot too, because he does it different than everyone, and in my opinion, better than everyone. He's that good. And speaking of good drafts, by the way, how in the world did Dwayne Haskins make it to the Redskins at 15th overall with no trade up? How did that happen? This is a guy who, to me, should have been a top 10 pick at worst, and he made it to 15, and to me, bailed the Redskins out of a very dire situation. I mean, if they didn't get Haskins in this class, they were kind of screwed. They had so much money tied up in quarterbacks, one of which wouldn't even be playing for them, wouldn't be playing ever again for them, in Alex Smith, because of his tragic leg injury. We don't think he's ever going to play again. They had more money tied up in Keenum. They got Colt McCoy there as a second or third string guy. Again, all that quarterback money adds up, and they were up against it in terms of cap space. They had no plan for the future. It was a very dire situation, and then all of a sudden, the seas parted, the clouds opened, and all of a sudden, Dwayne Haskins was sitting there at 15th overall, and to be honest, I don't think even the Redskins believed that would happen. For them to be patient enough to not trade up and not pull the trigger out of desperation, I don't know if I would have had that same discipline, to be honest. If I was a general manager, I don't know if I would have been disciplined enough to stay put and take him at 15, because I didn't believe he was going to be there. Like, I graded him as a franchise quarterback. He's not super mobile like a lot of the franchise quarterbacks you see nowadays, but in terms of arm strength, toughness, intelligence, leadership, like, this dude's a franchise quarterback, and they got him in the middle of the first round. It's absolute insanity to me. So that right there was arguably one of the biggest steals in this whole draft of any round. I'd put that up there with Jawan Taylor in terms of most ridiculous steals. And then in the late first round, they came back up in a trade and got Montez Sweat out of Mississippi State, who, I mean, that was proper value in my opinion. I graded him as a late one. They took him late one. Even with the trade up, I feel like the value was okay, just considering, positional importance and all that kind of stuff. Scheme fit wise, I'm a little bit curious to see how they make it work. I don't know if they're going to be standing him up or keeping him strictly as a 3-point or 4-point stance defensive end. I think he's more comfortable with his hand in the dirt. I don't know if he's got the same kind of explosiveness coming from a 2-point stance that he would from a 3-point stance, but I'm curious to see how they try it out. I mean, for all we know, that they'll kind of adjust their scheme a little bit and just leave him on the ground like I think they should, but that's going to be a problem for the coaches to solve in training camp. If they need to adjust, they'll adjust. It'll be fine. But in terms of pure talent, size, length, explosiveness, speed, he's a Jadeveon Clowney type of athlete. So I think you can gamble a little bit and then kind of figure out the rest later on that kind of talent. That's totally cool with me. The Terry McLaurin pick in the third round, I was a big fan of. He and Dwayne obviously were teammates. They're familiar with each other. Their timing is already good. So, if you're choosing a receiver prospect to kind of grow up with your quarterback and for them to kind of develop a rapport with over the years, you might as well choose his teammate and the best receiver on a very talented receiving core, at least in terms of route running and body control and all that kind of stuff. Paris is more dangerous in space, but pure receiving abilities, McLaurin's probably the better pure receiver out of the bunch. So again, big fan of that pick, great value. Bryce Love in the fourth. This one was intriguing to me because it's going to be determined a lot by medical. There was reports about his knee being pretty stiff after his ACL tear. They seem to be, I'm pretty sure James Anderson is still their team doctor, who's like one of the best knee doctors in the whole world. So if he signed off on that pick, it makes me feel a little bit better about it. He's a very different running back than Darius Geis, who they took a year ago. Love, to me, is a little bit more shifty, more of a finesse runner. You get him in space, he'll make you miss. Geis is, I'm just going to run you over kind of running back. He's a lot more power. In terms of straight line speed, they're both 4.4 guys, like legit 4.4 guys when they're healthy. But Darius brings more power, whereas Love brings a little bit more shiftiness and cutting ability. So I think they actually go together really well. If they're trying to run a running back by committee, I think Geis and Love is a pretty good young duo, very intriguing young duo, at least to me. The Martin pick later in the 4th round, guard depth out of Indiana, very solid. I had him graded him as a 5th rounder. They took him late 4, very late 4, so it's essentially the same thing. Value-wise, I was totally fine with that. They got Kevin Harmon, by the way, late in the 6th, very late in the 6th. Great jump ball receiver out of NC State. You could argue that Ryan Finley, who got drafted by the Bengals, I think, in the early 4th round, you could argue that Harmon was a big reason why Finley was drafted that high in the first place, because he's an excellent jump ball receiver, great body control, great sideline awareness, ball skills out the wazoo. Really, really solid receiver for them. They need all the depth they can get, to be honest, because I don't think they're going to pick up the 5th-year option on Doxson, considering the production he's not given them. And Harmon has a very similar skill set as a jump ball receiver. So if they feel like they don't want to pay Doxson, whatever his 5th-year option would be, it's somewhere between $7 and $10 million, I think. If they want to save some money, they can throw Harmon in there either this year or next year, and it'll essentially be the same thing. So great value pick there. And then Jordan Brailford out of Oklahoma State, I think, was a really good value rotational edge rusher. I think he's got a chance to make the team, to be honest, at the very least on special teams. But I think as a rotational edge rusher, there's a decent chance he's going to make the roster. I think he should have gone way before the 7th round. I had him graded him as a late 5, so to get him a full 2 rounds later is pretty good value there. So overall, very big fan of this Redskins class. Extraordinarily lucky. I don't think they'll ever be this lucky again, because the stars kind of aligned for a franchise quarterback to slip 15 whole picks in the 1st round, which never happens. But they desperately needed it, and they got it. So if I'm a Redskins fan, I'm thanking the football gods every single day, because this should not have happened. This whole class should not have happened. And if you're a Raiders fan and you stuck around for this whole thing, good news. I'm going to rip on somebody even harder than I ripped on Mike Mayock and John Gruden, because what the were they thinking? What the Like, why? Just why? Why? We heard the reports for over a month that this was going to happen. I didn't believe it. I did not believe it. I thought it was all a smokescreen. I thought there is no way that they are taking Daniel Jones over Dwayne Haskins. I did not think that was a legitimate possibility. And yet here we are. I get it. He's your guy. You say you got to go get your guy. Why is Daniel Jones their guy? Somebody's going to have to explain that to me. And don't say, oh, it's just because he's a David Cutcliffe guy. Who gives a shit? A third of the league's quarterbacks come from an air raid background at this point. Why do we care who David Cutcliffe has coached? Just because he developed Peyton Manning and Eli Manning all the way, 15, 20 years ago. Why is David Cutcliffe determining your draft process? Does his quarterback coach for the last 3 years really matter that much for you for the next 15 years, when he's not going to be coached by David Cutcliffe? Why are we placing the entire fate of the franchise in what his college coach is saying instead of what the tape is saying? Because you know what the tape is saying? This dude's not a top 10 pick. And yes, I have seen that video of Cutcliffe going through 10 different plays. I think it's on Duke's website. I watched the whole damn thing. And he's going through all this film, and he's explaining what he's doing and the throws he's making and the decisions he's making. You know what I saw? I saw very easy reads against clear man coverage where he's throwing the backside post with no safety help over the middle. Whoop-de-f***ing-do. Every quarterback makes that throw. Every quarterback should be able to make that throw. There's no safety in the middle of the field and your receiver dusted the corner by 5 yards. If you can't make that throw, then you shouldn't even be starting at Duke, let alone for the frickin' Giants. And then later in that same video, he's saying, oh, here's the throw that we want every NFL quarterback to make, from the opposite hash. And he shows a comeback. I don't care that you're running a 5-yard comeback from the opposite hash. That's not a hard throw to make, because a corner can't undercut a comeback even from the opposite hash. There's no physical way to do that unless he's literally driving on it before the route even breaks, which no corner is going to be doing. Like, we don't want to see him throw a comeback for 5 yards. We want to see him throw a 20-yard deep out from the opposite hash. They're two entirely different throws, and he's framing it like it's some sort of NFL throw. It's a f***ing comeback. Everybody throws that. Like, I just don't understand this fixation from Gettleman with Daniel Jones. Like, the only explanation I can come up with is because he's close with the Manning family, that Eli somehow signed off on him as his successor. Again, I'm not saying that Eli was the one that was forcing the issue, but I can't think of any other reason why somebody would look at this tape, you know, whether Senior Bowl or during the regular season, and say, yeah, this dude's better than Dwayne Haskins. He's not. He's just not. Like, that's the reality at this point. I'm not saying he can't develop into a good quarterback, but there's no way in hell that you had to take him at 6 instead of 17. Nobody else was taking him before 17. And, you know, I know Gettleman said, oh, well, we know for a fact that there was going to be 2 teams that jumped ahead of us to either trade up or, you know, take him ahead of us at 17. Bullshit. No, there weren't. And if they truly did believe that Daniel Jones, of all people, fit the John Elway profile, which he's the furthest thing from the John Elway profile, because John loves his quarterbacks to have cannons for an arm, yeah, no, sorry. He's not a Broncos type of quarterback. That's just, it's completely insane to me that this whole sequence of events even transpired. And it's a shame because the rest of their draft actually wasn't bad. Like, Dexter Lawrence, I feel like, was a pretty good value at 17. The pick bothers me because they literally already had a very good all-pro caliber nose tackle on the roster last year before they traded him away, and then they just replaced him in the first round this year. So yeah, that kind of bothered me a little bit, but in terms of pure in a vacuum value, Lawrence was a good pick. Baker as a late first round value, I wasn't in love with it that they traded up for him, but he fit the value for the pick, so I'm okay with it. They got Julian Love in the 4th, who I thought was going to be a first-round corner, so that was incredible value. They got Zimenez as a rotational edge rusher in the late 3rd. Again, great value. Connolly in the 5th was a good value. Who's the Auburn kid? Darius Slayton, who's probably going to be like a discount Andy Isabella, a true deep threat, take the top off a defense kind of guy. Good value in the late 5th. Overall, they actually did bring in a lot of really key talent in this class, but it's not gonna matter if Daniel Jones busts. Like, he not only has to perform up to the quality of the 6th overall selection, which, you know, suggests that we're taking a future Pro Bowl, perennial all-pro kind of quarterback here in the top 10. Like, you don't spend a top 10 pick on a quarterback unless you think he's going to be a franchise quarterback, and at the very least be a perennial Pro Bowl kind of quarterback. So not only does he have to live up to that expectation, he has to outperform Dwayne Haskins in Washington, who has a really good offensive line, a really talented running back duo. He's already got a great defense led by all those Bama boys. Like, he's got to outperform Haskins and exceed all the expectations for himself. And I just don't think he's going to do that. Like, my grade on him was nowhere near first round, let alone top 10, let alone top 6. It's an inexplicable pick. Like, the only way I can explain it is that the Manning family said, we know this kid and we believe in him and you should too, which there is merit to that. But at some point, you know, the tape doesn't lie. And the tape is telling me that this kid wasn't a first round pick. I know he's close with Eli, and I understand that they're going to have a good working relationship, but good Lord, like, if you got a top 10 pick, you got to get some freaking value. I can't keep talking about this forever, or else my blood pressure is going to go through the roof, but you get the gist. I, along with everyone else, hate what the Giants did. And it's unfortunate because I love a lot of their picks, but I still hate the class. It's the same kind of story with the Raiders, where as much talent as they brought in, I will always be frustrated by this class unless their first pick, the most important pick, completely exceeds all expectations and not just by a little bit, by a lot. There is no rookie quarterback that I think has more pressure on his shoulders in maybe the last 5 or 6 draft classes than Daniel Jones, and that's saying a lot. But anyway, thank you guys again for watching. I'll be back again tomorrow with another dual division review with AFC North and NFC South teams. Interestingly enough, a lot of teams in both those divisions weren't super enthused about their own draft classes, even though I was. So Tune in again for that. I'll see you guys this time tomorrow, and until then, later.